Hi, I'm Maria from theteacherschool.com, and I am an educational therapist and K-8 math specialist. And I wanted to talk to you today about how I choose which math games to use with my students. Now, I work with students who are sometimes years and years behind in math, and I don't have a lot of time with them, and my resources are limited because I move between classrooms and between spaces. So I have to be very, very picky about what math games I use. I find often that the math games that have been shoehorned onto curriculum in the past few years have not been super great. They're not often effective. They don't always get my students learning the skill. Sometimes they're just confusing. And so I wanted to talk about what I look for in a math game that I do like. So the first thing that I think about when I pick a math game is whether or not a math game can be differentiated easily. A lot of times the math games that we see in some curriculum are very specific to that particular unit and that particular lesson. But what I like from a math game is a math game that can be adapted on the spot. So if it's too hard, I can use a different set of numbers. I can have a different objective. I can make a multiplication instead of addition. One of my favorite games, Pig, is really great for this because you can use smaller dice, 0 through 6 dice. You can use bigger dice, 1 through 20, 1 through 12, and you can either do multiplication practice or addition practice with it. So if you say you have a third grade classroom, that's a great game to use all year long with your third graders, and you can adapt it where your kids are. The other thing I really like about having just a small set of math games that are adaptable is that I'm not wasting time teaching how to play the game. Kids already know how to play, and the time is really spent playing the game. So I think finding a core set of math games that are differentiable and are easy to use is going to really save you in the long run, which gets me to my second point, which is I look for games that are easy to implement, that don't have a lot of too many unnecessary steps, that my students can just dive right in and start playing. Sometimes if a game needs like too much prep, it might be a game that I don't play as often with students. So I'm really looking for a game that kids can just pick up and play, and they don't necessarily need supplies from me or support from me to start. The next thing I'm looking for is something where there is a great deal of kinesthetic engagement. I'd like to see kids moving things around, having pieces that they have to move or cards they have to play, something where they have to maybe color in or write or record. And usually my litmus for these kinds of activities is how engaged are my students who have attentional challenges. If my students who have attentional challenges are really into a game, I know then that it's kinesthetic enough to keep them engaged, and so it's kinesthetic enough to keep all of my students engaged. And then the last piece that I really want to emphasize is if a game has any kind of strategy building that's part of it. So as I mentioned before, that game Pig, you roll 3 dice, you add the numbers together. You actually have an option when adding those 3 numbers together to decide in what order and how you're going to add, right? So there is this strategy building that comes from playing certain games. There's other games like, I think, Race to 100, if you don't know what that is, just Google it, where students can use a combination of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and it's open-ended what they could use to get to 100. So things that have sort of an open-endedness to them, things that have a wild card, things that have students maybe work backwards, they have a product and they have to come up with the factors, anything that gets them sort of thinking in a different direction or to fill in blanks, anything that has more engagement than just find the fact. So if a game looks a lot like just find 3 times 7, that's not going to be as engaging and as strategy building as a different kind of game. All right, I hope this helps, and I want to highly encourage you to play games with your students. They're going to really build their skills quickly.